Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you're here because obviously decluttering is like a hot topic. I feel like it's a hot topic all of the time though, right? It's not just like
hmm
people think spring cleaning or like a fall clean out or something like that. But I feel like decluttering is like something that people can do anytime. But before
Yeah.
we get into all of the things, because I already have so many questions, my audience may or may not know you. So can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I love getting the opportunity to talk about this. It lights me up, and I know the impact it can have on people. So, if they're new to my world, I'm Amy Slenker-Smith. I have this little space on the internet called simplyenough.net, and I stepped out of corporate consulting after almost 20 years, and in 2016 to start my own business as a professional organizer, something I always wanted to do. And then when the pandemic hit, I pivoted like so many people. And I found a lot of people coming to me saying, Amy, do you do virtual consulting? Because my home office is a mess and now I have to work in it like 24/7 and my kids are at home for school. And it just became sort of an opportunity for me to see that this translates into coaching. And I know coaching is what you do in your line of work. So now I'm a decluttering coach, I'm a living simply consultant. And I think that that has what I have loved about that since I made that change is really just helping people to create this space for themselves. And it sticks longer. You know, a professional organizer can come in your home and many of them are wonderful. And when I did the work, it was wonderful and it involved coaching. But I always worried that it would boomerang back to the way it was. It was always my goal that it not do that. And I was quite successful in that endeavor. But I think there's something to this doing it for yourself. And that's what I really aspire to help people do because I think they can do it. Like they absolutely can do it themselves. And I know we're going to talk more about that. So that's me. I'm a mom to an only Zach and my husband Steve, and actually we're empty nesters. We just launched him into the world in August, so he's off at college, and so this is a brave new world for me right now, and I'm figuring it out. So
Okay,
that's where I'm at.
not decluttering related, but like how are you doing as an empty nester?
Oh, that's a great question. Some days better than others. Some days are, he's struggling, so we're struggling. Like it's an adjustment, for kids. And I think that there's so much of the high of the graduation from high school leading into the moving to college and the excitement. And then, like any honeymoon phase, that starts to wear off. And then we're all trying to figure out our new normal. So my husband has days where he's sad, and I have days where I'm sad, and we just try to balance each other out. They seem to not be the same days. So it's just an adjustment. And so I would just say, give yourself some grace. You never know when you're going to get a phone call and you just lean into the phone call when it happens. I joke that I like run for the phone when it rings and that's true. So pretty well, but it's not all sunshine and roses. It just isn't. And that's life. So
Yeah, that's totally life. Yeah, I get it. We're empty nesters as far as like my stepkids go. They're both out of the house. And when my stepson left because he had lived here full time, it was unbelievably hard. So we have an ours baby and she's was 3 at the time. So she would ask where he was, right? Like I was struggling
yeah.
when he was gone and then having
Yeah.
the questions. And I was just like, I can already feel my throat getting tight because
Oh,
I miss him. And he went to basic training, so we couldn't talk to him except for
oh
like
gosh.
5 minutes on Sunday. So I was like, um, we he I was like stuttering over my words. And so I'm like, he's gone. Um, we'll be able to talk to him on Sunday. We'll see
Oh,
him in December, which was a really long time away because he left in June. And so And she
Yeah.
didn't get it. And then now, again, but settling into your new normal, right? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can talk to you about that. Like I said before we even started recording, I feel like I could talk to you about a million things. But let's stay on topic here.
We can definitely there's lots to decluttering and empty nesting in that
Oh my
season. So
gosh.
we can definitely come back to that for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, so let's start at the very basic. Let's get rookie mistakes out of the way. What is the biggest mistake people make when they want to start decluttering or when they're like thinking about like, oh, I should definitely do that?
So I have
Oh,
two mistakes they make. The first is they start with sentimental stuff. They start thinking about, they're drawn to, but what about the kids' artwork? And what about the kids, dolls and toys and photos and grandma's china? And they get very wrapped up in the sentimental stuff.
hmm.
And so what I would tell them is I always say, put a pin in that. Sentimental stuff is dead last. Like you have got to build up a letting go muscle. You've got to see the benefits of decluttering. And the other thing that I want to say is that, with my journey, it wasn't about like I set out to just be this decluttering expert. I realized that I wanted to own less in my life. I wanted to own less because my life would be better.
Hmm.
A part of our journey is that it took my son was like 3 years in the making. So he's our miracle baby. He's our one and only. And when he came into the world, I realized that there was all this stuff that was getting in the way of my time and attention with him. And I didn't want that. So it's not about the decluttering. It's really about a different mindset and realizing how much better your life is going to be with less. And so we can certainly pull the thread on that a little bit more. But to answer your question, one of the mistakes is sentimental stuff. Um, and I just lost what the second mistake, sorry, the second mistake is they will say, but what should I do? They'll ask me, Amy, what should I do with grandma's china? Should I get rid of it? Or what should I do with my wedding china? Should I get rid of it? What should I do with my daughter's dollhouse? Should I just get rid of it? And they focus on this, should I get rid of this one thing? And it's never about the one thing. So I just had a coaching client and she said to me, she said, Amy, I have all these boxes for our Waterford crystal. And our Waterford crystal is displayed in the cabinet and we use it. But we have all the boxes in the basement. Should I get rid of the boxes? And I'm like, well, what else is in the basement? It's not about the one set of boxes. It's about everything else that's in the basement. And a storage room, if you define it, and there's a section that's defined as Waterford crystal boxes, then you should keep them. But it's really you've got to look at this more holistically and decide how are you going to how are you going to define this real estate? Like think of your home as prime real estate.
Ooh.
You decide what stays, you decide what goes. Like you're in charge of the stuff. And the fact that this is the stepmom, podcast, women are such the CEO of stuff in their house. Like they are, that's what I tell them. I'm like, most people I work with, I do work with some men, but by and large, it's women because they're in charge of all the stuff. They even their kids, the family stuff is like their responsibility. And so I try to encourage and empower them to say, you're the one that decides what comes and goes, what comes in and what stays, and how you define that space. So it's more about one question. They can't just ask me, what should I do with my china? Because there's a whole lot more to it. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's layers of like,
yeah.
so my initial question would be, well, like if you get rid of the China, then what's going to go there? Then what? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or how is it going to, are you using the china every weekend? Are you only using it for Christmas and Easter? Are you never using it? So it really comes down to keeping the things in your home. It's not so much about what's going to go in that space, because empty space is a beautiful thing. Empty space gives your eyes a place to rest in your home. And so it's really about, is that item adding value or is it creating work? I think so many people don't use china as an example because they have to hand wash it. They're afraid of breaking it. It's difficult to restore. Maybe they're storing it in padded containers in the basement in a storage room. So it's not really up in their space anyhow. So for me, what you keep should be items that are on regular rotation in your house, are adding value, are not taking time away from the things that you would rather be doing. So, I use the example all the time that my grandmother, she realized that my mom and my aunt and I were the ones doing the dishes at Christmas and Thanksgiving. And she didn't want that. She wanted to play cards after dinner was over. She wanted to enjoy opening Christmas presents. And so she went to this really nice, heavyweight, like paper products at Christmas time. And I think my mom and my aunt were mortified when she did this. The rest of us thought it was brilliant. And it wasn't so much about she didn't like her china, it was about the time with the people.
Mhm.
Like she could see that the time we spent cleaning up, probably an hour and a half because of getting through all the china and the crystal. She's like, no, we're not doing that anymore. She's like, that's not what the holidays are about. It's about having the time with people. And I remember we would play games. There was this game, I can't remember the board, but it was so cool. It's an old-fashioned game. And we would play cards. And those are the memories that stick with people. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing I would encourage you to say, like, do you have good memories of washing a whole bunch of dishes? Or would you have better memories of, playing cards with your grandparents or playing a game as a family? So those are the trade-offs that
Yeah.
come with the things that we keep. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. But then also, like on the flip side, you could have good memories. Not that, I mean, I think that your grandma made the right decision, but like you could also have good memories of spending that time with your mom and your aunt, like washing dishes, right? Like
Yeah.
when we go to my in-laws, like we always do, we don't do china, but like we do actual dishes. And um sometimes I just do the dishes by myself because it's like a reprieve from like everyone and like being on, like as the mom, like
Yeah.
you're but
Yeah.
then sometimes like my brother-in-law will come in and like help me or like my father-in-law's in there. And so like I just get to talk to them like one-on-one without
Yeah.
like 800 other people around. But yeah, so I guess there's a trade-off, but I would go for the heavy duty paper plates too.
She would buy these ones too that were sort of holiday decorated. She'd get ones that were Thanksgiving themed or Christmas
Oh,
themed.
fun.
So it was always really cute. But I think you're hitting on the point that I'm trying to make. Like, what is the memory that comes from this? And you're having that one-on-one time with people. You're not resenting the time, you're enjoying the time. And so that's a very different conversation than sort of traditionally all the men went to watch TV,
Yeah.
and traditionally the women in my family were in the kitchen, and that's a story for another day, but that just sort of
Yeah.
was generationally what it was. And my grandma picked up on that and just said, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. So I think it's a question of like, how do you view the time? How do you view the item? What is the connotation that comes with the item? And I would say, I said not to start with sentimental stuff,
Yeah.
but quite often when it comes to sentimental stuff, I find folks keeping bad memories. So the idea of sentimental stuff is that it always comes with a good memory, that it always has this, sunshine and roses kind of connotation. But there's an article that a really good friend of mine wrote about, she gives you permission to get rid of your high school yearbook. And a reader wrote to her and said, thank you so much because I threw it in the trash the day I read your article. He said, I had terrible memories and of high school. There was like bullying and things like that. And he said every time he looked at that yearbook, it brought back those memories. And it was just very freeing for him. So I challenge people sometimes on the sentimental stuff when we get to that point downstream. Just remember that not all of your sentimental stuff has good memories with it. And those are the ones, like, you're not that person anymore. It's
Yeah.
time to send those memories where they belong, which is in the trash can. So,
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I have a question about like sentimental stuff, but I'll hold off on that one.
okay.
What are your top three tips for someone who feels overwhelmed by clutter but like has no idea where to start?
Yeah, I definitely have more than three, but I tried to
Fine.
I knew this question was coming, and so I put some thought into it so I could be very prescriptive. So
You read my mind. You knew I was
I
going to ask you things.
I did. I knew it was coming. Like, there's always like, how do I get started? I'm overwhelmed. 100% the question that I get all the time. And so the first piece of advice, with all the love in my heart, stop shopping.
Hmm.
Stop bringing stuff into your home, turn off one click, disconnect the credit cards, decide you're going to create a shopping moratorium. For me, I had to stop going in Target. So when I give you this advice, it's because I've done it. Like I have walked the road you're in. So in the past, in fact, a lot like my epiphany moment about owning less was in the Target parking lot. And my son was an infant, as I mentioned to you. He was our miracle baby. I was doing the daycare dash, 60 plus hours a week, like in the office, and then working from home in the evenings. And I'm sitting in the parking lot and it's pouring down rain. And I'm about to get him out of the car. And I thought, what the heck are you doing? Like you just spent, 9+ hours at work. You grabbed him from daycare. My husband had dropped him off. And there's nothing in that store that I need that's going to add value to my life. There's nothing in that store that I need. In fact, it's all just taking my time and attention away. And so we never got out of the car. I yeah, I think I was like at the side of the car and I closed the door, I got back in, I drove home, and I used like that. I realized that little bit of time that I had with him every evening was so fleeting. When they're an infant, it's like they're going to bed at 7:30 and then you've been at work until 6 o'clock. So your time with them is like barely an hour. And that was when it hit me. So when I say stop shopping, it's because that's what I did. I stopped running errands. I stopped the weekly trip to Target. I stopped bringing stuff into my home. Every bag you bring into your home represents work. You have to find a place for it. Even groceries, like thinking about the stocking up on things or doing the Costco run, you are creating work in your home. And I'm here to tell you that stores like Target and Costco and Walmart pay thousands of dollars in rent every month to store it for you. So let them. Unless you really need it right now, let them store it. And I
Wait, can
know
you
you're going
repeat
to,
that? Because I'm sure that people are multitasking, right? Like I'm washing the dishes doing this, I'm vacuuming, I'm whatever it is. Can you repeat the rent part of it? So if you're multitasking, come back to us because that was really good.
so stores like Walmart and Target and Costco pay thousands of dollars in rent to store the stuff for you. You do not have to store it in your home. And I would challenge you, how many times do you go to those stores? So I was just coaching a client and we were talking about how she said, "Oh, I like to stock up because I don't like to run out to the store every week when I'm cooking dinner. So she has 3 freezers full of food. She has 2 pantries, a downstairs pantry and an upstairs pantry. Her downstairs pantry is her Costco overstock. Ask me how many times in my professional organizing days I was brought in to organize the Costco overstock. Every single time. And so I said to her, she said, "I don't like to run out." And I said, well, how many times do you go to Costco? How often do you? She said, "Well, every other week." I said, "How often do you go to the grocery store?" "Like 2 or 3 times a week." I said, "Okay, so let's back up here a second. You stock up so you don't have to run out often. And yet you go to Costco every other week and you go to the grocery store 2 to 3 times a week. It sounds like you could be buying on demand for the meal you're going to make. And you don't really need those 3 freezers full of food because all that's happening there is that food's going to waste. You're never going through it. You're never shopping from your own inventory and
Mhm.
you're never using what you have." And so when we stock up with those stores and the bulk buying is where people get in trouble. They see a good deal, but the stuff goes to waste. They see a good deal, but their kids stop liking it halfway through the supply. How many times have you, bought something that you thought your kids were going to love and they did love a third of it, and then you end up throwing out 2/3 of it because they got bored with it and they're tired of it. And you also have to store those larger quantities. That's what creates the disorganization. Like we're buying these volumes of stuff. And I get it. Like toilet paper is still a scary thing for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, I did just fine in the pandemic having not bought 2 cases of toilet paper from Costco. Like we were still okay. And so I'm here to tell you, you can be okay. So that's my first piece of advice is you've got to stop the inflow of stuff. And I used to say, "Oh, stop bringing stuff into your home." But no, it's like stop shopping. Decide that you're not going to go to Costco for 3 months. Decide that you're not going to go to Target. Like pick your poison, whatever it is. If it's Amazon, one click, turn them all off. Decide this shopping moratorium that you need to make for you. And I don't know what the store is for you, but decide which one is it, and just decide you're not going to shop there. And then that creates like this constraint where, oh, suddenly you realize you can cook a whole lot more meals in your house, or you have a whole lot more cleaning solutions than you realized, and you stash toilet paper somewhere that you forgot. And when you start to bring that volume down, I promise you everything gets easier in your home. So that's my first piece of advice. It was long-winded. I apologize.
I'm here for it. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, second piece of advice is donate routinely. So when we stop the volume from coming in, now we have to start sending things on their way. And it has to be routine. So when you are a coaching client of mine, you are required to go to the donation center every week or schedule a donation pickup to come to your house. So that's a requirement for staying in my program because I believe in it that strongly. Um, it helps to see things leaving your home. Like progress is progress. Drive to the donation center and drop off one bag, one box, two, 10. I don't care how much it is. We just have to make it more routine because then our family starts to see that it's a routine, that this is what we do. And then they're like, oh, well, I don't like this shirt anymore, Mom. Will you put this in the donation box? Absolutely. And that's what starts to bring family members along because that's a question I get all the time. I can't get my family on board,
Mhm.
which leads me to three other pieces of advice. Start small, start with your own stuff, and start in spaces you use daily. So starting small helps you feel successful. Like progress is progress. The junk drawer, your purse, your car, um, the kitchen counters, the silverware drawer, whatever's small and where you can do something like start to finish, where you can complete a space,
Mhm.
and then starting with your own stuff because it is so much easier to see other people's clutter in our house. Like my husband has some collections. I can visualize them very easily right now. My son has his own share of stuff, but at the end of the day, I have just as much as they do. And so starting with my stuff is where I show them that this is so important to me that I'm going to start with my own stuff and I'm not even going to touch yours for months. We're not even going to talk about yours because
Yeah.
more is caught than taught, especially with kids and with spouses. Much more is caught than taught. What my family started to see in me was a difference. So they started to see that my health was better. They started to see that I was prioritizing exercise. They started to see that my migraines were less. I was less stressed. Mom was more fun because mom wasn't overwhelmed by having to clean up the kitchen before she made dinner. Um, so that's the start with your own stuff. Like that's probably, if people take nothing else from this, like start with your stuff because you get some control. And as the mom and the CEO of all the stuff in your house, there's a lot that we can define as ours. Like the kitchen is probably your domain. The family room is probably your domain. You are the keeper of all the things. You're the finder of all things. And so there's a lot beyond just your own personal things that does fall into your lane, if you will. And then start with your own stuff, start in spaces used daily. I had to come back to it. Spaces you use daily is where you start to see it.
Mhm.
So a landing spot for your purse and your work bag or a diaper bag or whatever it is, your keys, your phone, your sunglasses, like make it easy to get out the door. Like don't go in and out the door 3 or 4 times. How many times have we done that? So spaces you use daily is what creates that momentum to tackle the harder and bigger spaces. So hopefully that was helpful and I'm sure you have questions. So I'll stop.
Oh my gosh, I do have questions because one of my questions that you've touched on a lot of them, but how does decluttering help with the mental and physical health and like all of the stress? Because you've
Oh
talked on
my,
that and it
yeah.
100% whenever we do like a donation or whenever we just like purge a bunch of stuff, I'm like, I feel like 100 pounds lighter. And
Mhm.
it's like literally not because I'm not literally physically carrying that stuff. But can you touch on
Yeah.
why decluttering mentally is really, I mean, why decluttering is really good for your mental health and not like mentally good for you, but like, yeah.
It is. It is. It's 100% related. And there is a connection to the way you feel. You feel a weight lifted. So when I was a professional organizer, I would drive a carload of stuff away from people's houses. And it was always a part of the service because I knew how that was going to change how they felt. It was going to give them the momentum to keep going. It was going to give them the momentum for us to keep working. And so now that is why it's a part of when I coach clients. I'm like, you have to do this daily. You have to, or weekly, you have to send me a photo of the boxes in your car or on your front porch because someone's picking it up.
Mm.
And even when the stuff is behind closed doors, we know it's there. So if you can close your clothing closet door, but you know there's so much clothing in there that you don't wear, and you stand in front of your closet every morning with a full jam-packed closet that is difficult to put laundry away, and yet you say to yourself, I have nothing to wear, you're making 15 decisions before you have even gotten downstairs, before you've even started your day. You have taken on this decision fatigue just about getting dressed. And so that's the mental wear. As moms, as business owners, as working professionals, as caregivers, we have a lot more important decisions to make in our life, in our day, and we should not spend the most important all that brain power we have just on getting dressed. So it's why people like Mark Zuckerberg and Barack Obama and Steve Jobs have a uniform. It's
Yeah.
because, and there are many very successful people who have a uniform because they're making far greater impactful decisions in their life that, Mark Zuckerberg puts on a gray sweatshirt every day and Steve Jobs wore a black shirt or a black turtleneck. I have a uniform. I have colors I like and colors I don't like. And it's very routine. I stand in front of my closet and I love everything. And so there's no decision fatigue because it's like, do I want to wear this favorite shirt or this favorite shirt? So that's just one example of the mental wear and tear. But I will tell you that another kind of catalyst to my desire to own less in my life was a health crisis. So I was working I was working full, and this is where I think a lot of people finally get it. Unfortunately, I think it happens for them a lot later in life. It's a later health crisis. It's when they're less physically capable. That's when the moment hits them. So I consult with a lot of empty nesters who have aging parents, and they're faced with their home and their parents' homes. And so they're looking at both of them as, oh my gosh, we got a lot to figure out here. But so when my son was young and I was, working full time and was doing the daycare dash, um, I was what my husband would call, he would say like self-medicating with a half a bottle of wine every night. And when he said that to me, he's like, your migraines are really bad. You're up until I would get a second wind and I'd work from like 10 to 2 and then get up and do it all over again the next morning. And I just had these really unhealthy habits, be it about what I ate, lack of exercise, all sorts of things. And then I found myself in a state where I had this migraine that lasted over 2 weeks.
Um,
I could not get rid of it. I mean, the amount of Motrin I consumed in those 2 weeks, it was just unending. And so I finally went to the doctor on a Friday, and I remember this so distinctly. And she said to me, she's like, okay, you have to stop taking Motrin. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm surviving on that. She said,
yeah.
you have to stop taking it because you're giving yourself a rebound headache. You have to stop taking it. And she gave me something else. And then she said, if you have the worst headache you've ever had, I want you to go to the emergency room. And I just laughed at her. I was like, okay, right. Like, that's never going to happen. It was like the worst headache I've ever had to go to the hospital. That sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Monday, Monday morning, I called my husband at work and I worked from home. I had gotten up. I had the capacity to get my son to school, which was literally, I walked him across the street. We had this nice short walk, thank God. And I came home and I'm like, I'm sitting in the fetal position on the floor. And I call him and I said, it's happened. And he said, what's happened? I was like, I have the worst headache I've ever had. I'm like, I am so sick. My head hurts so badly. The pressure is so bad. I can't even lay down. The pressure is so bad in my head. And he said, he's like, do you think you need to go to the hospital? I was like, I can't. I was like, you have to come home. I cannot drive myself to the hospital. And so he drove me and I had sunglasses on and they took me in a room and the nurses turned the lights out. And long story short, it was rectified. But in that hospital room, and I can picture it right now, my husband said to me, something has to change with the firmness that I needed and the love in his heart. He's like, something's got to give here. And I was like, you're right, something has to give. And so he called my parents and they came and babysat me for 2 weeks. I was not allowed to watch TV. I was not allowed to get on the computer. I was not allowed to pick up my phone. And my parents asked me every 5 minutes if I still had a headache. So that was fun.
That's so fun.
So fun. But in that moment, I was like, it's my time. How am I spending my time? It's the stuff in my home that's causing me to have to spend more time on taking care of it instead of eating healthy and exercising. And I'm burning the candle at both ends with work. I've got to get a handle on my calendar. I love being busy. I'm a classic Enneagram 3. I am a three-wing 3. That means I want to get stuff done. I want to check stuff off the list. I want to volunteer for all the things. But what I realized what in that moment was the connection between the stuff and my calendar and my time and my stress. And you can do a lot, but you can't do it all. And you definitely can't do it all if you have a house full of stuff you're taking care of.
Yeah.
And so the sooner that I started getting all that stuff out of my home and also focusing on my calendar and focusing on what I was signing up to, it just changed everything. It changed everything. My stress came down. My health was, I, I, I now can handle my migraines with diet, largely with diet and exercise. Diet, exercise, staying hydrated. I have a rescue medicine that is thankfully not a horrible narcotic, which is what I was facing at that time. And I knew I didn't want that. I knew that was a bad idea.
That is
So
crazy. Yeah. But kind of
so
like you
hope,
said, you just needed your eyes need a space to rest. And if you've got all of this stuff on top of like a completely full calendar, on top of a really stressful job, on top of
yeah.
trying to run your life and everyone else's, right? Because I feel like we kind of fall into that. But then
Hmm.
like I cannot even imagine the headache. I mean, actually I can't imagine the headache that you've got. And it's just like the pressure. When you were talking about that, I'm like, yeah. Oh my gosh, I
Hmm.
can just imagine.
Yeah. I had the most amazing nurse. The doctor's like, do you want us to turn on the lights? He's like, oh no, we're not doing that to her. Like he put the IV in the dark. And it
Hilarious.
was just the most impressive thing. So thankfully that was like the wake up call. And I'm so glad that happened to me when it did, because now what I see is the wake up call of people who are my age, who are, fast forward 20 years, who are faced with aging parents who have a house full of stuff and their own home with a house full of stuff. And thankfully, about 50% of them say, I don't want to do that to my kids. And they come into my world and we make sure that they don't do that to their kids.
Mhm.
And the other 50%, quite frankly, say, I'll just let my kids deal with it when I'm dead, which is a horrible thing to say.
Yeah.
And it creates trauma in families, and I've seen it. And so, if anyone's listening and thinks that that's an acceptable answer, I'm going to tell you, I don't think you love your kids that much if that's what you think is an acceptable answer. I mean, I can't apologize for it. It's probably one of the harshest things I'll say, but when I work with clients, I love them enough to say, I don't think that's who you are. I don't think that's what you really mean and what you really want to do to your family. And until someone like me says that, I don't think they realize that that's what's going to happen. So,
Yeah. I remember when my great grandma had passed away, like from the Depression era, right? Or era, and
yeah,
had like two of everything, three of
yeah,
everything. And so it was my grandfather's mother. And so but my grandma, so his wife was the one that like went through and like cleaned out all of the things. And she was like, what the hell? Like there's so much stuff here. And so she was like, I'm not going to do that, to my kids, like my mom and like aunts and uncle. And then we're not super minimalistic, but we definitely trend more that way.
yeah,
Other places where we can button things up, absolutely. But yeah, I don't want to do that. But then also, like my in-laws are aging, and whenever we are there, they're like, "Oh yeah," to my daughter, they're like, "Take anything you want, take it home with you."
yeah,
And I'm like, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. And so then they'll say, "If you don't do it now, you'll do it when we're dead." And I was like, "All right, that's valid. I could just take it home and then we can donate it or whatever."
yeah.
But yeah, it's so that kind of leads me to my next thing. Because speaking of kids, because my daughter is always like, yeah, I'll take it. I'll bring it in. But
Hmm.
what do you do if you've got kids or stepkids that are like constantly bringing things? And you touched earlier about like artwork, right? Because that's like kind of a sentimental thing, but like kids bring all of the things. Oh, I found these rocks on the road. Oh, look at these sticks. Oh, I have feathers, all of the things. What do we do?
Collections,
Yeah,
collection.
collections. Like you're talking about your husband's collections. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
just donate, toss when she's not around, which isn't necessarily the best thing, but we do have conversations about, we
Hmm.
do clothes, we do toys, like we donate them, or, she's got a pile in her room, like these are the ones that we were donating, or these ones don't fit anymore. So she's already like set up for that. But
Yeah.
the other things, I'm like, girlfriend, we're not keeping all of
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many thoughts on this. I love this. I love this question. So I appreciate you asking it. So some of it goes back to it starts with, it doesn't go back to, it starts with what I said about starting with your own stuff and setting a good example for your family. So if you're constantly talking to your kids about them having too many toys, and you've not done the work yourself, you've not shown them. So what we always showed my son is that us donating our stuff was very normal. Like we were going to walk the walk. And so the first thing you've got to do is really walk the walk for your kids. And an easy way to think about how much stuff you're going to keep is about respecting boundaries. And this gets into how I would give you advice about kids too. So when I talk to people about, let's say, a clothing closet, I would say and it's jam packed. If it's difficult to put laundry away and you dread putting laundry away, then the problem is always too much clothing. So I'll have folks come to me and say, I just have trouble with laundry. And I'll say, no, you have too many clothes. Like it's not a laundry problem. You can start and finish laundry. And in fact, the less clothing you have, the less laundry you will ever have to do.
Mhm.
So simplistically, if you only have six forks in the drawer, you only ever have to wash six forks. If you only have five t-shirts, you'll only ever have to wash five t-shirts. Now, five doesn't have to be the number, those are extreme, but
Yeah.
it illustrates the point that the less that you have, the less that you will have to ever clean and care for. So I had a client once and she had remodeled her kitchen beautifully, but she had like pots and pans in two different cabinets. And I said, I think this is a recipe for disaster. And she said, why? I said, because your three kids are never going to have to wash a pot. There's no limit to the number of pots. And she's like, you're right. They just fill up the sink and just get out a new pot. And so that's the same concept with laundry. So back to kids. So setting the example by respecting the boundary of your own space. Like, how much space do you have for clothing? If your closet will hold 15 pair of pants and 10 shirts and 10 sweaters easily, like really think about like, okay, I have 18 inches of long hang. That's how much I can keep. Instead of saying I have this wardrobe and I'm trying to cram it into the space. And so then when it comes to kids, we say, here's the boundary. You have two shelves of toys. And so what toys do you really want to keep? Like which ones mean the most? And you can help to guide kids too, because I definitely don't recommend throwing things away under the cover of darkness. I actually had put some things out for a yard sale once, and I took some of my son's things and something got sold, and he watched it be sold and he was devastated. I made a huge, huge mistake, and I would never do it again. And this was early on when I was learning, and I was focused on everybody's stuff. Like everything was fair game.
We're having a yard
And
sale. Everything's going. Actually, just walk through the house. Take whatever you want.
yeah, kind of. It was exactly that. I was like, I have to gather stuff from everybody.
Mhm.
And in retrospect, I should have only ever done my own stuff. And I learned that was a really hard lesson to learn. I can still see the look on his face.
Wow.
So I encourage you to not do that because it'll stick with you. You'll also break their trust. So when kids' trust is broken, like stuff is taken from them under the cover of darkness and then it disappears, they start to cling on to things even harder. They're like, oh no, you got me once, you're not going to get me again. So now I'm going to decide I'm not getting rid of anything. I'm not giving you anything because I don't trust you. And so it's better to have conversations with them. Like I said to my son, I'm like, hey, you're 5 and Christmas is coming and your birthday is coming. And so you're probably going to get some new toys. But I want you to find 5 toys that you are willing to donate that we'll put in the donation box and it'll go to kids who don't have a lot of stuff. And he could think through that. Now the 5 toys he brought to me would fit. I'm holding out my hands here like I'm like cupping my hands together. Those 5 toys I could fit in my hands. And I cheered him on. I applauded him. I was like, this is fantastic. You've done such a great job. You found 5 toys. And it was about setting the example. It was about
Yeah.
getting it to be routine. And back to the boundaries piece. This is what helps kids with putting toys back too. So it is nice to have like some baskets and boxes and label them so that they know where things go because it makes it easier. But it's not enough to just bin and box stuff up. So I hesitate to give that advice a little bit. It is really about bringing the volume down.
Mhm.
And all the studies show that kids will play more with fewer toys. They will play more with open toys. So, an open toy is something that is a traditional toy, cars and trains and blocks and dolls, and something they can be imaginative with that doesn't. So, anything without a battery.
Yeah.
Battery toys are like the first ones, they're the one-hit wonders. They are entertaining the child instead of them entertaining themselves, getting immersed in this imagination of a black cape. So, a black cape, as opposed to a Spider-Man mask, a black cape, they're suddenly, maybe they're Batman at one point, maybe they're Robin. Like they can be imaginative about that. It's why they create forts. It's why taking pillows and blankets and creating forts just is the imagination that comes out in kids. But here's the thing. Most people in their homes have a toy room. They don't have a playroom.
Ah.
So hear the difference. Do you have a toy room in your house or do you have a playroom? A playroom has space. A playroom is space to play. And it has fewer toys because you've given them the room to be imaginative. You've given them room to build some block tower that they can leave for days. I get lots of questions about Legos. I think they're the greatest toy in the face of the planet. They're an open toy. They're creative. But so many times people say to me, Amy, how do I organize Legos? I'm like, you don't. You
Mhm.
don't organize Legos. You create space for Legos. You eliminate all the toys that they're not playing with. And sometimes that means boxing them up temporarily. Sometimes that means saying, hey guys, I see you're not, or say to your son or daughter, hey, I see you're not playing with these other toys. How about we put those in a box in the basement, in the storage room, and just put them there for a couple months and see if you want to come back to them. And this is where you can target those closed toys, the ones that have the battery, the ones they're not playing with, and say, I'm going to create a space for you to play with your cars, to create, the ramps with your cars or to play with Legos. We're going to create space for you to do that. And then notice the difference in your kids. So most children, when toys are like, I had a friend who boxed up a whole bunch of toys because her son wasn't playing with them and she was mad. He was never cleaning up. And so she just boxed a whole bunch of them up and took them away as a penalty. He saw that as a benefit. He thought it was the greatest thing that ever happened because kids are smart. They don't play in a toy room because they know they're going to have to clean all of that stuff up when they make a mess. And so that's why they gravitate to other places in the home where there's open space to play. So if you're frustrated that your kids are dragging toys all over their house, look at the storage space you're using for toys and ask yourself the question, how easy is this for them at their age to put stuff back? Is there any room for them to play in the first place? So I'm going to pause there because I could clearly on my soapbox and I could go on and on about this
Oh
one.
my gosh, that's so brilliant though, because we don't have like we don't have a toy room. And I say this with like the most love. This is not a condescending thing at all, but like our whole house, I feel like our whole main floor actually is a playroom,
Mm.
specifically like our living room. Like my daughter like will build anywhere. And because essentially she is an only child, right? Like my stepkids are out of the house.
Yeah.
She can leave a Lego tower
Yeah.
for days. She can leave a Lego house, or we have like the little
Yeah.
building too, for days.
Yeah.
And she'll come back and like her animals will be there. And I was like, I love that you touched on open toys versus like closed toys. Thank you so much for doing that because I was kind of a crazy person, but I was very adamant that any toys that she got when she was younger, and she still is only 5, I
Yeah.
wanted open toys. I
Yeah.
absolutely wanted open toys. Anything that had a battery, I wasn't like completely neurotic about it, but I had very specific instructions. Please buy open-ended toys, nothing with a battery. We
Yeah.
had, I mean, she did have them. We had like a wooden push toy, like when she was little, like learning how to walk. We also had a plastic one. For whatever it's worth, she gravitated towards the wooden one because
Yeah.
there were like the little gears that you could turn. There was a mirror, there's like a little xylophone where like the plastic one, she could push the buttons and it would light up and talk to her, but the other one had a lot more like cognitive
Yeah.
she had to do, right? But she's very, very imaginative. Like I don't know how many stuffies we have, and I won't get rid of them. Like this just came up in August because we'd like rented a lake house up north and I'm in Michigan, so we'd gone to like Mackinac Island and we were at a gift shop and like getting gifts for people, and then we'd gotten like some shirts, and so my husband had said to her, what shirt would you like to get or whatever, which at that age I kind of think a shirt is pointless because they grow out of it so fast, right?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
I'm like, whatever. Well, she had seen, I will never forget her look. She had seen this little, all of the stuffies have names. They all have little personalities too. Like, this is so ridiculous, but it's cute. Like, it proves my point. So she had seen this little, like, unicorn that was all like, it's purple, but it's got like a rainbow tail and a rainbow horn and all the things. So she calls it rainbow unicorn. That's its name. And she had wanted that. And he had said, well, I want you to get a shirt. And so he'd like, she was like upset by it, but we're like walking to another store. And so I finally said to him, I'm gonna try not to cry. We're going back to get that stuffy. We're going back to get that rainbow unicorn because she doesn't really have siblings. So these are her friends and
Yeah.
these are the things that she plays with. And he was like, oh my God, you're right. I didn't even
Mhm.
think about it like that. And so I don't know if you've ever been there, but Mackinac Island, you have to take a ferry out there to get there to the island, take a ferry back. So the whole way back, she's like, oh, look, Rainbow, like here's, we have to get on a ferry. So she's explaining everything to them, right?
Mhm.
So when you're like, the kids don't put, this kid plays with all of her toys and like we'll set them up, like whatever. It's crazy. So yeah, I'm with you like on a playroom versus a toy room. And if I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, whatever needs to be cleaned up, she's like, okay. So I'm okay with you being on a soapbox about it because I'm 100% with you. But I know some people are like, you guys are crazy. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? But it's true.
The fewer toys you own, the more your kids will play. So if you're frustrated that your kids are not playing for an extended period of time, it's the type of toy, and more importantly, it's the quantity of toys. Like I can even get over you having like some things with a battery. Sure, we had some things with a battery,
Yeah.
but it's the volume. And I also don't think that I love that what you said about, you don't have necessarily a playroom. We did not either. And I always I know the criticism is coming, like we've both got only children. And I get that. I
You only
do
have
get
one kid. You don't
you only
understand.
have one kid. Yeah. Been there, done that. I get it. We only have one. However, that's where I think the volume is even more important. And when you have multiple children, here's the thing that happens. The younger kids skip over the baby toys. They skip right to. So you can still reduce what you have because your younger children, I've seen it with clients and with friends. The younger kids are like, I don't want those baby toys because I want what my siblings are playing with.
Mhm.
So they tend to skip a lot of phases of toys. And so as you have more children, you can start to cycle out more of those baby toys because unless it's the first or the second, those younger type toys are going to be overlooked almost from the word go. Because the little kids want to keep up with the big kids. So that's why I don't think that it always applies that we have it different because we only have the one. But we didn't have a playroom either. We decided that this section of our family room was going to be where he, could play with toys, where he could get out books. And because it was smaller and it was easier for him to put stuff away, he was more apt to put stuff away. But like you, with fewer toys, like I don't mind you're leaving stuff out for a couple of days. I don't mind that you're still working on a Lego build. He worked on this one Lego build of a house for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
2 years. It was on a table. He and his friend, it was on like a kid table. He and his friend worked on this house for 2 years. They both just went to college and they literally talked about it 2 months ago. And they said, do you remember that house we built? I mean,
Mhm.
come on, like talk about a core childhood memory, all because I had the space for them to work on that for 2 years, never got frustrated by it. Now, to be fair, it's important every week or every, 10 days, I would say to Zach, okay, like we've got to clean this stuff up. Mom needs to vacuum. So it's, but you want it to be easy and you want it to be at a frequency that they don't feel discouraged. If they feel like they're going to have to put all their blocks away every day or they have to put all their Legos away every day, there's no incentive to want to play with those toys because mom's going to make me clean them up anyhow. So when I say I don't organize Legos, we had a very loose organizational system. It was, larger bins, ones that snapped closed so that if they spilled, they didn't go everywhere. So it's really about kind of meeting kids where they are. It wasn't about color coding the system or anything like that. It's about meeting kids where they are, and the first thing you've got to think about is the volume. The volume is, I can't, like the quantity of toys is, that's the answer every time.
Oh my gosh. And like speaking of Legos and being a parent and all of the things, right? Like I feel like anyone says this, it's so cliche, like, oh, I don't have very much time. So with limited time, can you still declutter? Like even if it's just like a few minutes? Because I know people are going to be like, well, I only have 10 minutes. I only
Yeah.
have, 5 minutes. And I find that I get so much more done in a 5 minute decluttering or a 10 minute decluttering because I'm like hyper focused on this is what I'm doing, as opposed to like, okay, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to take the day and spend the whole day decluttering. Well, guess what? Tomorrow comes at noon and now it's lunchtime. And you know what I've done? Maybe like 5 minutes of something. And then I've gotten everything else done. So for somebody that's listening to this and they're like, okay, Amy, that's great. I love like what you're saying. And maybe I don't agree with everything, but can I even declutter if I've only got a few minutes of time? Is that possible?
It's 100% possible. So, with all the love in my heart, like pause this podcast, look at your screen time on your phone,
Oh yeah.
then tell me you don't have time. And if your screen time, if you are better than me, awesome. That's where your time is.
Mhm.
So, listen to while you're listening to our podcast, declutter one drawer, like empty it. Just go to the junk drawer or your purse, or go out to the car. Like you have your earbuds in anyhow, so just go out to the car and see how little time like that takes you. I love so studies show that you're more productive in smaller increments of time anyhow. And so, yes, like I just explained to you, when I started this, I was, 50 to 60 hours a week in an office with a commute and a daycare dash, a young son, and clearly not taking care of my health. And that's when I realized how important this was. I think this work is too important to not do. It's also a season. So there are going to be some things that maybe this is the season for you to say no to. And I don't want you to say no to them forever. I don't want you to say no to girls' night out or a weekend away with your husband forever. But maybe this is the season until you move some volume. That's why donating every week matters, because you did not accumulate all this stuff overnight and it's going to take some time. People that are in my coaching program are in it for 6 months. I am in it with you for the long haul. Like, I'm not going anywhere. I know it's going to take some time. It's going to get hard. Some spaces you just want to close, you do close the door and you just ignore. I've had plenty of clients who say, I don't even go in the basement anymore. So there are probably spaces like that where you're saying, I don't even go in that spare bedroom anymore because it's our dumping ground. Or I work at the dining room table because my home office is such a mess, I can't work in there. And so I would just say that this is where your time does need to be spent. It's so important. Consider the donation center, like that trip you're making every week, treat it as important as a doctor's appointment. Like, would you just not show up to a doctor's appointment? No, you go to the doctor's appointment. Would you not take your kid to soccer practice? No, you'll take your kid to soccer practice. So treat that appointment as something that serves your family and helps your health. It's that level of importance when you do it. And that's why you've got to start small. Yes, I know you only have 15 minutes. Okay. So you're in the kitchen cooking dinner, like empty a drawer, go through the coffee mugs, go through like one category at a time and have a donation box by the front door. So have it there all the time so that when you're ready to drop something in it, a donation box on every level is really helpful. That way, when your son or daughter comes out and says, my son does this all the time. He'll be like, Mom, this shirt doesn't fit, or Nana got me this shirt and I don't really love it. Is it okay if we donate it? Absolutely. It's totally fine. She will understand. It's routine, it's example for him. So I literally used to have a box in our spare bedroom. I don't even have a box in there anymore. But if I find a pile of clothing in this one corner of my spare bedroom, I know it's donation because my son and my husband have dropped it there. It's like a signal that there's no guesswork in it anymore. It's so routine in our house. So I challenge you on the you don't have time, because when I did the bulk of this work, I leveraged donation pickups because it helped me. Maybe I didn't, maybe, you're taking a lot of kids to soccer practice or lacrosse practice and you need your car for gear. So you can't load donations in it. Well, then use a donation pickup service or use soccer practice on Thursday as your deadline. Like, you have to get that stuff out of the car. Otherwise, you can't transport children. And so these sort of tricks and hacks that I used were how I motivated myself to do the work. So hopefully that helps and
Yeah,
answers
and
your
I like that
question.
you talk about doing one thing at a time, because when you were talking about like, oh, you're making dinner, like do this, I could see somebody saying, okay, well, I start with a junk drawer and then, I get that endorphin rush of like, wow, look how great this looks. So I start something else and then I just burn dinner, or I just do one thing at a time or start
Yeah,
in one small area. Yeah.
small, absolutely a small space. And you start to enjoy it, and you're like, oh my gosh, look how nice the clean counters are. Look how great this feels. I don't have to clean up the kitchen before I cook dinner. I always can find my phone and my sunglasses and my keys because I have a landing spot. You're returning things to where they belong. So that's it, starting small. And I was taking advantage of nap time after Zach went to bed, Saturday mornings. My husband went and was playing cards one night. I put Zach to bed early. That would have been a perfect, night for me to have some girlfriends in maybe and have a glass of wine. And I'm like, no, in this season, that's not what I can do. That's not what I need to do. I've got to move some volume out of my house because that's how I'm going to serve my family. And it wasn't like that forever. Um, Once you're in maintenance mode, I still go to the donation center twice a month,
Mhm.
but that's about controlling the volume and keeping it. in a way that I love it, in a way that it feels good to my family. We're in maintenance mode. The systems all work. The systems and habits are just as important as the bringing down
Oh
the
my gosh.
volume.
You do like perfect segues to like my questions. Like, because my next question was what systems or habits can people do to like keep and like remain clutter free or like maintain that? I'm all like flustered because you knew exactly what I was like where I was going. But what I've heard you say often is like, okay, have a donation box, make time for it. Start small, which I think is so important because that's what I say with stepmoms. They're like, okay, I'm struggling with this. I want to tackle everything. And I was
Hmm.
that's amazing. And I love that for you. However, you are going to burn the F out so
Yeah.
fast and
Yeah.
then you're not going to do anything. And I know that, but I've also done it like with like decluttering. I'm like, oh, let's do this. And then then I've got like my whole bedroom destroyed. And then I'm like, oh my God, I don't even want to do this anymore. Like I just want to like
Hmm.
put everything back and not start. So start small, have regular donation habits,
Yeah.
whether it's once a week or, if you're in maintenance mode like you are, like twice a month, have a designated area in your house.
Yeah.
Everyone's on board. Like, what other habits? Like, if somebody is like, okay, you know what? I've gone through and I've done a lot of decluttering. Right now, you're speaking to me, okay? So I've gone
Okay.
through and I've done a lot of decluttering. Everyone has done it. Everyone's on board with like, we donate, we, get rid of things that
Yeah.
aren't serving us anymore. What maintenance things can I do?
What maintenance things can you do? Okay.
Or
That's a
anyone
good.
else that's listening that's in the
Okay.
space too.
No, no, it's a good question. I would say so you're like I have these phases sort of 1 through 5. You're like phase 5. Where now you can start to really up level the organization in your home. So quite often I'm like, oh, people are like they want to start buying organizing tools in phase 1. And I'm like, no, 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 because I am certain you have a box or a bin somewhere in this house that we're going to repurpose because it is my goal and is my intent. And it's because I know all the organizing tools already exist in your home if you're just getting started. They're already there. We're going to repurpose a piece of Tupperware in the kitchen and it's going to fix a toy solution or it's going to fix a bathroom solution. That's not you. You're in this phase 5 where you're going to see where things are not working as well, where your habits and your systems aren't working. You've already, as long as you've done the reducing phase. So I have a remove, reduce, return. When my clients start working in a space, I'll tell them, okay, if it's the junk drawer, we'll stay with that example, remove everything. You dump the whole drawer, you take everything out, you reduce and you return it. And as you're returning it, because you're already in maintenance mode, because you're already, you've already brought the volume down, this is where you can think about, okay, how would this function better? What's the definition of this drawer? Could I store some of these things in a different place in my house? Is this system still serving me? And looking for those hot spots where clutter is building up regularly, where you're having to go back to it. Then it's time to ask the question, okay, I don't have the right system here. So I am so terrible about buying things that we redid our laundry room 2.5 years ago. And I said, I'm not putting in a cabinet. I'm not putting in shelving. It is a stackable washer and dryer and an empty space. And I was like, I don't know yet how this empty space is going to function. And I'm going to watch, I'm going to observe what accumulates here. What storage solution do I need? Because I
Oh,
was pretty sure I didn't need shelves and I didn't need a cabinet, and I don't. So I have these magnetic containers on the side that hold the washing machine pods. Shoes are accumulating here. We have a laundry basket for laundry, and we hung the Dyson stick vac hangs there. So that's how the room is being used. I don't need shelves. I don't need a cabinet. I don't need a countertop to fold clothes.
and
But
yeah.
it's about observing how those spaces are and are not working. Now I need a shoe solution. So I got to come up with that. But right now, the shoe solution is that everyone takes the shoes they're not currently wearing in this season back to their closet.
Mhm.
So I'd almost argue that the solution of the floor is just fine. And so buying organizing tools when you're early in this process is not going to fix the problem. They're just going to become clutter.
Hmm.
But later on, for someone like you, it's seeing, okay, what would really help me here? What would really serve me here? I recently installed something for the dishwasher pods that attaches to the cabinet under the sink. That's brilliant. It's saving me. They're no longer getting destroyed and wasted. And so places like that is for you what I would look for. Like, where does it make sense? So that's the beauty of this. Like once you've done all the work,
Yeah.
then then you're in a space where you're saving a whole lot of time and you're saving a whole lot of money not buying stuff you don't need, and you can invest it in some storage solutions that do actually make things easier for you, that make the habits and the systems work. And that's the stuff that everybody wants to get to. Like they want to get to all those, acrylic boxes, which for the record I think are useless in refrigerators. They want to get to that point, and that's not where you start. But I'm here to tell you, you can get to that point where you're buying a few fun solutions. But it's phase 5. And I know most of your listeners are in phase 1 of this. They're just getting started. So know that that's in your future. Know that that's a goal and you'll get there.
I would say I'm probably like phase 4 or four, like 4.5. Like we're not
Okay.
like, perfect at it. There's definitely like as you were like talking about things, I'm like, oh yeah, we could do this or we could do that or we could do this. But yeah, if you're listening to this and you're just starting out and you're like, oh my gosh, I am so overwhelmed and I'm never gonna get to like where Amy is or like where Alicia is right now. Like I'm not perfect, but you will in due time, right? Like
Yeah.
a little bit at a time. Like, don't just become obsessed and just like, I'm going to focus on this and we're going to just knock it out today. It's not like you've got to have those systems in place. You've got to have the habits there where it's just normal. And like trying to I would say the hardest part is trying to get everyone else on board,
It
especially if you're
is.
in a blended family, right? Because there's like all of those dynamics too. So just
Yeah.
like you said, start with your own stuff, which I think is great, like lead by example, which is a lot of
Yeah.
what I tell people that I coach or, just like in my DMs, like I'm struggling with this, how do I do this? And it's just like keep being you, keep doing what you want to do.
Mhm.
But so I love that you said start with your stuff and people will see the change that
Oh
happens.
gosh.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yeah.
I can't go, it's funny, some of my friends who saw this change in me. So confession, I used to be like a Black Friday shopper, and my closest girlfriend who used
Yeah.
to do that shopping with me, she is like, when I had this moment when the migraines were bad, when I kind of started putting it all together and started, I joked that I was getting rid of anything that wasn't nailed down in my house. And the only two things that were safe were my husband Steve and my son Zach.
Yeah.
And now the cat is safe. So there's three things. But that's it. Everything else was like fair game.
Yeah.
And she started to see my social media. She started to see what I was doing. And she's like, "Who are you? What has happened?" I was like, "Ugh, it's so for the good." She's like, "I can see the brightness in your face." She goes, "I can see the change." She goes, "But I just don't even recognize you anymore." And so I would say be that example
Mm.
that your family just doesn't recognize you anymore. When you're going for a walk with a girlfriend, instead of running to Target, when you can, cook a healthy meal for your family. I think too, Alicia, the one thing we just didn't talk about that I'm thinking is that for a lot of the people I'm coaching, it's about the identity that they want to have. And I'm guessing that your stepmoms want to have an identity of of a mom in a certain way. Like
Especially if
as
they come
mom,
in without kids. Yeah, for sure. Like
you
I need
you
to
won't,
try to pretend to like be this mom or like have this mom role or I don't even know what like a mom really looks like. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Like what do I do?
yeah. And so I realized that my identity was, and this came back to kind of my why. And so I was actually talking to my audience just the other day about the why. There's always a why that's about more than the stuff.
Mhm.
It's never just about the stuff. In my experiences, never. And as soon as I know what the real why is, that usually comes back to what people's identity is. Like I wanted to be I wanted to be a fun mom. I wanted to be a not exhausted mom. I wanted to be a mom who cooked healthy meals for her family. The first like 10 years of my marriage, I could not cook. I set the stove on fire. I couldn't, I mean, literally I did, fire engine and all. Um,
Wait, how? You have to got to tell us that story. Wait, how did you do that?
so I was gonna make dinner this one time in like 3 months. One time every 3 or 4 months, I would make dinner, and I was home early, which was a shock. And I'm making dinner, and I had too shallow of a pan because I was completely unskilled.
Okay.
And I dumped the tomatoes into the pan, and we had a gas stove, and flames went up, and I ended up just shorting out the stove. But it was like the scariest moment. I really thought that the whole thing was lighting on fire. I called 911. The 911 operator asked me if anyone else was in the house, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my son is upstairs taking a nap. And she goes, go get him. Like, I mean, 911 operators are great.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I killed the stove. And my husband came home because I called him and I said, when you get home, there will be a fire engine parked in front of the house, but everyone is okay. And he's like, I don't think I said it that calmly, just for the record.
Yeah.
And he got home and he's like, you could have just told me if you didn't want to cook dinner.
It's hilarious.
So, I didn't want to be the mom who set the stove on fire anymore. I wanted to have, I wanted to volunteer at my church. I
Mhm.
wanted to I wanted to lean into my family and my friends. Like my five values are faith, family, friends, health, and generosity. And I wanted all five of those things. I wanted people to be able to say, yeah, that's who she is. Like those are her values and she lives them. And so when I got clear on what I wanted, like my identity to be and my values to be, that's what created the priorities in my life. That's when I was able to say no to things. That's when I was able to say no to the stuff coming into my house. That's when I was able to say, these things do not fit any one of those five values. And my calendar started going through that filter too: faith,
Mhm.
family, friends, health, generosity. Does it fit into any one of those categories? And if it doesn't, I'm going to think long and hard about if I'm going to say yes to it or not. So,
Yeah, I love that. One thing that we did not talk about was how do we tackle the emotional attachment to things?
yeah. So there is, this is, please don't hear this as a trite example. It's definitely not, and I need to think what the statistic is. I might misquote it, so I'll be careful on that. But there is, there's the photograph principle. And so I think the emotional attachment means that it's a sentimental item, first things first.
Yeah.
So I think there's a sentiment attachment to it, which means that you're going to deal with that stuff last. The
Mhm.
best thing to do in your home is go easiest to hardest. And what easiest is for you will be different from the next person. So a lot of my empty nesters, um, and aging parents. So the easiest for them is the attic, which I would never start in the attic. But easiest for them is the attic because they know the passage of time has taken care of. They're like, I can throw that stuff out easily. So while I want them to start in a space they use daily, that's too hard for them. And so what I've learned is easiest is different from for each person. Some people are very emotionally attached to their shoes. And so we can't start with shoes. I would say maybe clothing closet. So where you have that emotional attachment, I think you've got to wait on those items and start with things that don't have an emotion or a memory attached to them. And then back to this photograph principle. Um, if you're realizing that there's an item that's completely impractical in your home and really serves no purpose, and you need to just get rid of it, but you're struggling with it, I think it's because you're worried you're going to lose the memory if you get rid of the item. And so taking a photograph of the item means you can preserve the memory of the item. I would also think through, do you already have a photograph of that? So an example was I got a number of things when my grandmother passed away. And one of the things I got of hers was her Christmas sweatshirt. And I never really wore it. I just didn't wear it. I didn't even wear it to an ugly sweater party. And it just wasn't my style. It was too big, on and on and on. And I realized that I didn't need to take a picture of the sweater or the sweatshirt, because what I loved about it was the photo of her wearing it at Christmas time. I already had the photo. It was one of my favorite photos of her. It was a few months before she passed away. And so think about photos maybe you already have of your family enjoying that item. And if you have that, the photograph has already taken care of itself. So,
Yeah.
so
It's really good. Yeah.
I would just say, consider whether taking a photo is what's going to allow you to release it. And if it is, use the photograph principle as much as you can. I want to say, I can't remember that there's a significant statistic. It might be, I think it's more than 35%, but it basically increased the amount of donations that people would make if they use the photograph principle. So just know it's a sizable number and it will make a difference. So,
Yeah. So you talked about something that you had gotten from your grandma when she had passed, but what about, can you talk about gifts? Because there's a lot of guilt like surrounding gifts, and like especially if you are donating them, or worse yet,
yeah.
like they're in shambles and you just throw them away. Like people feel terrible about things that other people have given them and just letting them go. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So gifts should be given freely. And I certainly understand that there are times when family members give you gifts with an expectation. So that's not a gift, that's guilt.
Mhm.
And I think and this is a good time for it. Like we're early enough before the holidays
Mhm.
to have those conversations with family to say, we just, like, here are some things that would be helpful. I think it's always helpful to give lists of things that would be truly helpful and value added. And I think it's helpful to have a conversation ahead of time with family members to say, you know, there will be things that don't serve our family, and sometimes those come in the form of gifts, and we will pass those on to other people who can use them. And just be kind of upfront that that is what you're willing to do. Now, I don't recommend when you're just getting started to start donating all the stuff that other people have given you. So my family knows that I have made my own share of mistakes of things I've brought into my home, and I rectify that by sending them on their way. So once I had a question from someone who said, my sister gave my daughter these two beautiful like doll houses, but she doesn't play with them, and I think we want to get rid of them. And I was like, well, maybe don't start with the things that the sister gave. Maybe look at the toys like holistically. Are those toys that, again, they're an open toy? Would your daughter play with them more if the other toys were not a distraction, if they didn't feel like cleaning up was going to be? So, kind of back to our open, closed toy conversation. So, I don't recommend starting with the things that people have given you, but at the end of the day, as parents, it's up to us to decide what comes in our home and what stays, what serves our family, what doesn't serve our family, and to eliminate the things that don't serve our family. Just like you would set a boundary about, I'm sorry, you can't buy my child that gift because it's too old for them, or a video game that's not appropriate for them. Having boundaries is okay. I think it's just helpful to have those conversations up front and to say, we have limited space. We're trying to be really mindful. We want to teach our kids to care for the toys that they have. And we find that when they have too many, they're not able to do that.
Mhm.
And so I think it's perfectly acceptable to give away gifts. Every year, 9 billion with a B dollars is spent on unwanted gifts. And
Wow.
so I mean, imagine what could be done with $9 billion in the world.
Yeah.
And so another thing that is helpful and will span the test, like will run the test of time far more than a physical gift, is also to have conversations with your family about experience gifts. Like
Oh, we do that.
instead of exchanging gifts, can we do an experience? With grandparents, this can be hard because they want a physical item. You can always pair it with a physical item. So buying your daughter maybe swimming lessons and pairing it with a bathing suit.
Mhm.
And then you make a point of taking the grandparents along to the swimming lessons, or you make a point of taking a video of the swimming lessons and making sure they are a part of that. Um, what kids will remember is experiences with grandma and grandpa far more. So whether that's a small trip or a big trip, zoo memberships, museums, but just engage the gift giver in the event is what creates what's called this memory dividend. I just read a book called Die with Zero, and he talks about the memory dividend, which is when you have an experience and then 2 weeks later you talk about the experience, and then 3 years later you talk about the experience, you're constantly adding this memory dividend. And that's why I think the older generation likes to talk about things that have happened in the past because they're reliving, they're adding to that memory dividend. And the same is true for your kids. So,
Kind of like you were talking about Zach in the house. You remember when we built that house? Do you remember when we did?
yes,
That's so crazy.
yes, it
Uh,
is. Yeah, he has a memory dividend associated with Legos that he is, was already reliving. So, and
and
I
what
had forgotten about it. I had forgotten about it. So,
you're like, oh yeah, I remember that thing.
yeah.
I love that you talked about like memberships, whether it's a zoo membership or like swimming lessons or whatever. Like we have a hands-on museum here and we used to have a membership and I totally forgot about it, but I'm like, just wrote a note like send this idea to in-laws.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Channel the generous grandparents. Like generous grandparents, you got to, at the end of the day, you have to let them be grandparents. My mom is a generous gift giver. But at the same time, she knows that things come and go in our house. There's no guilt. I don't have any guilt about it,
Mhm.
because we've been very upfront about that. And we've set those boundaries. And so she is much more apt to stick to a list
Yeah.
and respect our wishes as a result of just having some of those conversations up front instead of on Christmas Day being frustrated because your kid's opening 50 packages and you're like, how is this stuff even going to fit in my car?
Mhm.
That's not the time to have that conversation. So even though she shows up very generously, we let grandparents be grandparents.
Mhm.
And what you do as parents, like that's our job there to do things differently because we're the parent. But
Mhm.
for grandparents, I do try very hard to let her be a grandparent and to not be frustrated, but really see the joy that it brings to her. And then, as I said, my son knows that sometimes there are things that aren't a fit, and that's okay. We pass those on. Um, and um, and then we channel the grandparents as best as we can. So.
Yeah. And I love that you touched on experience gifts as opposed to
Mm,
tangible things because we switched to that pretty early
yeah.
in marriage because it just got to the point where it was just like you're gifting things just to gift things. Like, here's our
Yeah.
anniversary. We have to do this. So now
Right.
we'll do like a traditional like wedding gift. So like next year's our 10-year anniversary. And I don't even know what the 10-year one is, but we've booked a trip. So we typically like we like to travel. So
Yeah.
typically like birthdays or holidays, anniversaries, we travel.
Yeah.
And for me it's sentimental. Like I didn't grow up with any money and so like we never travel. Like I went to Disney World twice with my grandparents, not even my own parents. But it's something that you and whoever you're with or that other person, like you guys get that. That's your memory
Oh my
and
gosh, yes.
whatever. And like that lasts forever. Where, yeah, you
Yeah.
kind of touched on this, like you kind of grow out of things, whether it's a toy or a souvenir or the shirts don't fit. Like I was talking, like my husband, like, let's get this shirt for her. And I'm like, she's going to grow out of it in like a year.
Hmm.
It won't matter, she won't remember it. Whereas like the stuffed animal, she's gonna be like, she still talks to him. And, like it's yeah, but the experience part of it, it's just that bonding aspect of it. And it doesn't have to be something crazy big. Like it could be
Right. I
like
was
we
going to say
want,
the same thing. It does not have to be anything extravagant because
yeah,
I definitely would want, people to hear that you don't have to take a trip to Disney World. It doesn't have to be getting on a plane. Um, I'm a huge advocate for travel experiences. And another part of kind of that epiphany that we had when my son was young was I said to him when we would be in Target or in a store and he'd say he wanted a toy, I'm like, would you like that toy? Or would you like to go back to Disney World? Would you like to go to the zoo? Would you like to, have the water splash park membership this summer? So in that moment, I would remind him of that trade-off, because that was also about teaching him the financial implication. And there is never too soon to start with kids having those conversations about. That's one thing. I was just having a discussion with a family member that I feel like we really did right with my son, because it's not just about like depriving ourselves of stuff. It's about being intentional with our time and our money. Those are the two biggest benefits that you're going to glean from bringing the volume down in your home. And when we shift how we spend our money to experiences, that's what stands the test of time. All those toys that were bought are just going to get thrown out and end up in the landfill. And that's a story for another day. But you get what I'm saying, is that you can suddenly shift like how you're applying your budget into things that are going to last with your kids. Whether it's travel, whether it's, we took my son out of school for 3 months when he was in elementary school and traveled the US.
Mhm.
We planned that trip for 2 years. We put a budget in place and we figured out how we were going to do it and how we were going to homeschool him. And this was pre-pandemic. We were, people thought we were crazy, but we figured out how to make it work with budget and jobs and all the things. And that 3-month trip he used in his college essays. He wrote all about it. He continues to talk about it.
Yeah.
He can tell you meals we had in cities that I don't even remember. And yeah. So was our money spent in the right place? Do I wish we bought a whole bunch of stuff and brought it into our house? Heck no. Like that was, that's such an example of an experience that he's going to have for the rest of his life. And I foresee him doing it with his own kids too. So,
Yeah, it's cool to like see that like passed down. Okay, as you wrap up, I have one last question for you. Like, what's probably the most rewarding part of decluttering for your clients?
oh,
Or it could be like, I don't know, like the top few things that you see.
yeah, I think it's that relief on their face when they realize the connection to all the other aspects of their home. So when we started this conversation, I was like I said, I didn't set out to just be this like decluttering expert. When they realize that the answer is to own less, when they realize that their life is going to be better with less, when they realize it's going to, add time back into their schedule that they thought they really didn't have, but they do, when it adds money to their bank account, when they see these connections and seeing the weight lifted. So I have two pictures of stuff that's like leaving someone's house today. When I get text messages of a porch full of stuff or a car full of stuff, and they're like, it feels so good. And that's the feeling every time. It feels so good that stuff is leaving your house.
Mhm.
I think that's the most rewarding part for me, is how I know it's not just changing like the way their home looks, like it's changing their life.
Yeah.
And that's why I do it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because anytime that we do like a purge or a decluttering or like a
Mhm.
donation thing, I'm always like, this feels so good. But I grew up like volunteering and like giving back. And so it just like takes me back to like those memories. But
Yeah.
also it's just like, yeah, it feels like a weight is lifted. Yeah.
Because it is. It is.
Yeah.
You don't realize that the stuff can weigh on you physically, even though it's in your house, you're not literally carrying it around, but to some extent you are, because
Yeah.
it's a project, you've got to deal with it someday. It's just a matter of when.
Oh my gosh, Amy, this has been so good. Thank you so much. I will link everything in the show notes, but where can everyone find you? What do you have going on? I know you've talked about coaching. Like I know you offer that. It's
Yeah.
something you have, the coaching is like a 6 month thing. Do you have a membership too? Like tell me everything.
You're so sweet. So I would say that the best thing to do is just get on a call with me. You can go to simplyenough.net, and that's my website, simplyenough.net, book a call. and we'll talk through, figure out, where you're trying to get started. Those calls are no strings free. Let's just start there. And then I can guide anyone to a free resource that I have, um, a, whether it's my coaching or whether it's not. But I love doing this because I know sometimes somebody just needs like a little kickstart and they can do it themselves, or sometimes they know what they need to do, but they need the accountability. And that's certainly what I'm there for. So simplyenough.net is my website. You can book a call. If you want to learn more about the 5 habits of my clutter-free family, it's simplyenough.net/habits. And that is a downloadable guide, and you can get started there. And if you do nothing else, like start there, start with those 5 habits. But we can talk through all those on a call as well. So I would say either one of those options would be great.
I think that I'm going to go ahead and download that, even though I might not actually need it, but I'm like, okay, you can always do better, right? So I'm like,
There's a couple that on there that there's at least one that will surprise you. And
I'm in.
There's one that everyone struggles with. It's probably the most important, but I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to go find out.
Okay. Thank you so much. This has been so amazing.
Thank you for having me. It was such a joy. I love doing interviews like this. So thank you.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crosco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.